name is Gabrielle O'Neill. I have a nursing background and I'm currently a health development specialist for the South Eastern Trust. My experience of bacterial meningitis and sepsis, 2016. My children are Tara, Rory and Kevin. My husband's name is Kevin. Rory had started teacher training in St Mary's University here in Belfast. That meant in around the end of August, September, that the family were separated. And Rory duly came home on the 16th of December from university, and the week before that plays football for Cross Midland Rangers, and he was playing minor football for Armagh county team, and they were after winning the under-21 county championship. As you can imagine, boys being boys, were down in Belfast trying to get their assignments in, burning the candle at both ends. So when he arrived home on the evening of the 16th of December, he didn't feel well. I just said, away up to your bed and get a good night's sleep. I didn't really realise what was actually going to unfold over the next 48, 72 hours. But he slept for about 5 or 6 hours that night. He came down to the sitting room to me and my husband about 10:30, 11, and he made a comment which actually sticks in my mind, is that was a very deep sleep that I had. I didn't pass much remarks of it, and I thought, well, it's just you trying to catch up on sleep. And off he went, and I could hear him playing the PlayStation for a few hours, and then he went on to bed again and fell asleep. The next morning then, he was meeting his teammates and they were going for a Christmas session of training. But within an hour, he came back to the house, and he had, what I realise now, at the time I wasn't, a shiver. Not so much a full rigor, but he was shivering, he felt cold. He said the changing rooms and the field and that was cold. Again, rushing around at Christmas and the girls home from their respective universities, I said, just take 2 paracetamol and go on up to bed and you'll be grand. Again, really not taking much under my knowledge at all. But later on that evening, things started to take a different turn, where he woke up and he started to complain of abdominal pain, stomach pain, and generalised aches and pains. He felt very hungry, very thirsty, and both. He took a pint of water, he took a wee bite to eat, and Julie went off to sleep again. I took his temperature, it was unusual. It had went, 35.6, 35.9, but within about maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes, it had shot up to like 37.8, 37.9. There was just that unusual difference in his body temperature. He was going from hot to cold. But he got up later on in the evening and he started to vomit. And it's abdominal pain, and then his temperature was very high at this stage. It was about 38.2. And being a nurse, I suppose I just put those 3 classic symptoms together, and I thought, we've appendicitis here. Sore tummy, the high temperature, the vomiting. Never really took much notice of anything else. Just, encouraged him to not eat anymore, just drink, and we would sort of be a watchful wait. Wasn't going to run into casualty or anything with it, just monitor him overnight myself. Later on, about 11 or half 11 at night, he actually seemed to perk up. He seemed to come round a wee bit. He took some water and he said, I feel a wee bit better, so I do. So that was all right. So me and my husband were keeping a watchful eye on him or whatever. So that night, about 1:30, just went in to check and realised very quickly that he wasn't responding to me and he was actually on fire. So I called my husband and he came in, and I said, I'm going to ring the out-of-hours doctor and find out, what should we do? Should we maybe take him on into Daisy Hill or whatever, the casualty unit, or what would she actually recommend at this point in time? But things escalated very quickly in the house, where his hands and feet were cold, his body was roasting, and he was very hard to respond. We did get the out-of-hours doctor on the phone. She herself had said, no, I don't like the symptoms that you're telling me. Hot and cold, cold feet, cold hands, warm body. And then when I was talking to the out-of-hours doctor on the phone, and we started to strip him down. We quickly seen some black spots on the soles of his feet, up his calves, and then quickly round his his torso, round his chest, region. And I have to say at this point, I started to squeal because I did say to the doctor, it's the worst possible thing that could be happening to him. I think he has meningitis. And at that point, the GP, very astute GP, she said, please don't move him. I'm going to blue light him. And I said, no, we're 17 miles from our nearest casualty unit. We're going to try and get him into the car. Please put an ambulance on the road. Please make sure there's antibiotics or whatever on the ambulance. You know, we'll try and meet halfways. And that's what happened. We got him bundled him into the car, and we got to within 10 miles of the hospital, and we met the ambulance. And the paramedics were excellent. We got him into the back of the ambulance. We got it very hard to get a line because he was shutting down, because he was going into shock and septic shock. But eventually the paramedics did get a line in. They got some fluids up, some normal saline up, and they worked on him on the side of the road for 40 minutes. And I have to say from the outset that their intervention at that particular time saved his life in the end. So as we got into Daisy Hill, his blood pressure was 80/50. It didn't rise. His respirations were quite fast, and he was in the resuscitation room. We know a hell of a lot more now, 3 years on, about our sepsis 6, about 3 in, 3 out, about looking for urine. But at that stage, there was a lot of panic in the resuscitation room, a lot of panic with me and my family, and in the middle of it all, Rory was just drifting and sliding into a coma that I never thought that anybody could slide into so quickly. We very quickly knew then that we were bypassing everything that needed to be done, and Rory's only chance was life support and to be ventilated. Very quickly then, the clinicians came into Daisy Hill and progressed to ventilation. Daisy Hill doesn't have an ICU unit, they have a mobile ventilator. We got Rory on the mobile ventilator, and we got him down the road, as we say, to the RVH, to our ICU. The next 24 hours were a bit of a blur for us as a family, but as you talk to the clinicians and the nurses and that were treating him, critical, because he really did go from bad to worse. We have notes showing that his lactate levels were off the Richter scale. His blood pressure was in his boots. He was all over the place, and really sepsis and septicemia had taken a grip, and the diagnosis of bacterial meningitis had been made. He had all his vaccinations, all his childhood vaccinations, his MMRs, and all that you have to have. And he also had the ACWI, and he had that in and around the middle of August. But unfortunately, it was the bacterial meningitis that he contracted, not the viral. So anyway, the next 48 hours were critical, as I say. The sepsis had taken hold, the bacteria had taken hold, and his body went through a humongous change where he took diabetes insipidus, which meant then that he needed renal treatment, and hooked up to all these paraphernalia and machines and different bits and pieces. But I have to say the staff were very good. And I suppose being a nurse, I was bypassing the machinery because it wasn't alien to me, but very quickly realised that I needed to ensure that my husband and my daughters and my family weren't frightened or afraid of what was happening and the amount of beeps and bleeps and all that goes on, but that Rory was making progress. So he was ventilated on the Saturday night, which was the 17th of December. Actually, it wasn't until the Tuesday that we started to see a chink of light, and that we started to see him, coming round while he was still critical. The first sign really was that the antibiotics were starting to work, and we seen the white cell count coming down. But over the course of that 72 hours, we did go through, talking about organ retrieval, we did go through, the possibility of losing limbs, digits, limbs or whatever, so there was a whole, tumble dryer of emotions that went through everything. if we were to lose him psychologically, how everybody was going to process this. But the main thing was that he was started to come round on the Tuesday. That's when I suppose the clinicians decide then to sort of, drop the anaesthesia, and he started to come round. We were delighted, but he was exhausting himself. He wasn't strong enough to breathe on his own. So eventually then on the Tuesday evening, which was heartbreaking, it really was heartbreaking, the clinicians took us aside and said, listen, we are actually going to have to put him under again. You can imagine, we were just so happy to see his eyes opening and some of his limbs moving, his fingers just, I suppose, they were jittery as opposed to moving, but they had to put him under again. You just put all your trust in everything that has been given to you or whatever, but thankfully he actually did come back stronger on the Wednesday when the anaesthesia then drifted off again. He actually come back and he really blew them all away, because they actually didn't think he was going to actually, come out of the ventilator and that sort of anaesthesia, unconscious state for another 24, 48 hours. So you can imagine the whole thing was stopped about 1 o'clock. You stop at about 7 with the night staff, but it comes out of your system about 1 or 2 o'clock. And he was sitting up in a chair talking to us about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So he is a remarkable young man. He actually doesn't, I suppose, realise how remarkable he is, because he was, as he says, I was sleeping through all this. I have to say, for all the clinicians that were involved and the multidisciplinary team that was involved in his care, right from the start, from the GP out of hours, right to the paramedics in the ambulance, to when we get into the resuscitation room and we had the nursing assistants and the nursing and the junior doctors, senior doctors, registrars and consultant, right to the anaesthetist. Everybody played their part. Everybody supported and pulled together and worked as a fantastic team. And then when he got down to Belfast, again, the same again. We have our son today, and he's making progress. He's, it's taken him a wee while to sort of, get back on his feet, to process everything that has happened. But I'm one of the lucky mommies that through meningitis and sepsis, I have my son, and he's alive and well and with us today.